And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. So, to start off, thank you for joining me today. So, for our first story today, we'll be talking about Google. Now, we've been talking previous live stream regarding Google's situation wherein government is investigating for their monopolistic antitrust case. And based on the article here, the US is planning, if things go their way, that Google may be broken up into different companies if that were to happen. So why is this so? So let's take a closer look here. Now, obviously, so the US government is suing Google, as mentioned, for their illegal use of market manipulation that, you know, completely eradicates the competition and obviously limits the option of the users themselves. Now, is this fair for doing such a great job like Google here? Now, obviously, this is not the first instance that a big tech company has been sued by the United States. One such company is Microsoft for their anti-competitive practices way back in 1998. Now, the outcome was a settlement left the company still intact. On another case, years before that, is it way back in 1974, wherein a case against AT&T led to the breakup of the Bell system. So, the what do you call this, antitrust case here had varied results. So, whether what comes out of it, and it's going to be a long, tedious process. But again, as mentioned, the main contention here is that Google acted unlawfully in the case that to maintain its position in search and search advertising on the internet. And if this is not considered monopoly in the market, let's take a closer look. So according to the industry data here, Google has 90% of all general search engine queries in the United States. So that's a big chunk. And considering in other parts in the world, like in India, I think they have a 99% market share in that region as well. And compared to searches in mobile as well, they have 95% of that market. So if that's not considered a monopoly, I don't know what is. Now, according to the Justice Department here, it was stated that this is not good for the American people, that Americans were hurt by Google's action. Now, obviously, when they started out, this was not a problem, but they became too big in a sense. So at the end, this has a negative effect towards the consumer as well as other competitors who wanted to compete with them, and even other developers who's trying to gain a foothold in the same space. And as mentioned, ultimately, it's the consumers and advertisers that suffer from less choice, less innovation, and less competitive advertising prices. Now, obviously, if Google is the only one providing that services or platform, so to speak, they get to dictate the terms and policies as to who can join them, who can compete with them, or actually technically no one can compete with them, and make it hard for others to compete with them in the likes of this situation. And according to Google, they're stating that the case or the lawsuit is technically flawed, and that they use Google because they choose to, not because they're forced to or because they can't find alternatives. But technically, they're somewhat right because people choose Google because it's already there and readily available. But in terms of choices, obviously, for consumers, for anyone at that, options is always important, given the choice of choosing whether buying a product or service. So in this case, having a alternative to their search engine is always ideal. It's one thing about the Google company as a whole, but obviously Google's reach has been growing at an exponential rate, acquiring other companies to supplement their market share or market hold in the industry as well. And despite the cases that's ongoing, their shares are up by almost 2%. So it's now, if you're planning to invest on Alphabet Google, it's now worth in the north of $1,500. And it's not just the case of government suing them. Now, the Trump administration and the Democrats, in a rare occasion of solidarity, are in the same focus in terms of breaking up big tech companies that has a monopolistic control in the market. Now, obviously, this has got something to do more with the upcoming election. So, obviously, another issue here is President Trump is highly motivated because showing as a political gesture of sorts that a promise he made to his loyal supporters to hold companies to account for allegedly stifling conservative voices. Obviously, he's a Republican at that. And it stated also they complained that social media, with the likes of Twitter, Facebook, and so forth, they take action on the reduce of the spread of conservative viewpoints in their respective platforms. Now, one of their ways of Google to monopolize the market is by paying, what do you call this? By paying mobile companies, like in this case, Apple and Samsung, to be the preferred search engine, which is Google. Now, obviously, when you purchase your own brand, whether old or brand new, you can see that the preferred search engine is always Google, right? And they pay millions or even billions of dollars just to make sure that they are the preferred one. And if that's not leveraging your market position, I don't know what is, right? So is it Google's fault for doing such practices? Is it the fault of other smartphone makers like Apple and Samsung? Because they're just doing business, right? Or, is it the government's role to monitor them and, limit the reach or expansion of, which is Google? Anyway, and as mentioned here, and in general, as mentioned in the article, their search engine services and search advertising and general search text advertising require complex algorithms that are constantly learning. And obviously, with their, what do you call this? Their leaps in terms of being ahead of the market has given them a distinct competitive advantage over other competitors who's trying to, capture or compete with them. I think Apple's trying to do that as well, but they're still years or even decades away if you think about it. And despite this antitrust, what would come about it? It's not only what do you call this? It's not only Google that's under investigation. Other tech companies such as Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, and we discussed this recently in another live stream. And I don't think suing them and fining them would be a deterrent because, as in the case in the European Union, Google was already fined in the north of $1.7 billion for stopping websites from using Google's rivals. So again, leveraging their control in terms of what people can search and what people can use in terms in their platform. And they were also fined in the north of 2.6 billion back in 2017 for favoring its own shopping businesses in search. That's no surprise. And back in 2018, they were also fined by almost $5 billion for blocking rivals on its wireless Android operating system. Now, obviously, Google has already expanded its aim of not just being a platform, but also in tech devices, Google Home, the browser, as well as the mobile phone as well. Now, will this have a significant effect towards Google in the long run? On a related article, some say there may not be a significant impact that would, for everyday people would notice it, regardless if the government were to make a significant inroads or to win the case and break up the Google, which is the titan that they are. Now, according to an antitrust specialist, the upcoming action can be seen as more of a tremor rather than an earthquake. So any changes contributed to Alphabet's Google maybe seen as, a likely an incremental changes to people's life rather than a significant changes that everyone is expecting, especially if you're the market leader in the market right now. Obviously the issue is will always go back too much power for any company, and they tend to routinely abuse their dominance in the market. I think that's the same case not just for Google, Amazon, Apple, and even Facebook are on the same boat. That's why they're being sued by the U.S. government now. Whatever, if there's anything that comes about it, we still have to wait and see. And based on historical data, it's been proven difficult, okay, or even challenging to make inroads with, especially with the powerful technological companies, especially for their lobbies who you know helps politicians with investing heavily on to support their initiatives and so forth. And according to a professor in of law in Denmark Copenhagen University, Christian Bergqvist stated that the US antitrust action showed that the US government was belatedly adopting the more tech skeptical European approach, which goes to show that Europeans were the first one to penalize such company as Google. Actually, I think Facebook is also in a antitrust case in the European. So again, is finding them will be enough? Obviously, they have a significant resources to back them up. So paying millions or even billions of dollars may not be amounting too much for them. And at the end of the day, uh, the term "fine and forget" seems to ring close to heart here. And obviously, at the end of the day, the goal is aggressive dismemberment or separation of the company as a whole. But is it more likely to occur or unlikely? So based on the statement here of the analyst, it's stating that it's unlikely that people would notice if there would be a difference, and eventually Google won't be as unaffected as much as people would like to. And again, obviously they've already been in the market for several years and even decades, so maybe other companies can come in and encroach in other parts of their businesses as well. But as a whole, I don't think anything will come out of it significantly anyway. Continuing, so for our next topic, so speaking of other tech giants, so we were just talking about Google earlier. Now it's about Amazon. Now, obviously, Amazon is known for their e-commerce platform for selling different a variety of products, from tech to clothing and so forth, right? And one of their key products that they're selling primarily online is books. Whether you're fond of reading fiction, non-fiction books, and obviously this go against to the typical where you typically buy your books in the bookstores, right? And this has already hampered the retail industry, to name a few. And now bookstores are in the roads of similar how retailers are going in the way of being extinct, right? And according to the American Booksellers Association, so let's see here that there you go. And according to the American Booksellers Association, has launched an advertising campaign against Amazon to alert the public to what it calls the growing danger that bookstores are under. Obviously, the convenience of purchasing items online is so enticing that there's always a what do you call this unintended consequence, like in the case of retailers or bookstores at that would have a decrease in their sales. Now, is it the fault of Amazon by providing value to their customers? Now, obviously, they're just doing their job by providing better service to customers who prefer convenience over having to go to the actual store and purchase the books. But obviously, on the other hand, you miss out interacting with actual people who are knowledgeable in terms of what do you call this well knowledgeable in terms of the books that you are looking for and what types of books you're looking for. In the case of Amazon, obviously they're using algorithms, AI machines to analyze your preference, and they would give you a recommendation as to what you can do. Now, If you're comfortable with that approach, then it's okay. But for the majority, people still do like to interact with other people, and I think maybe the bookstores needs to find a way to innovate as well, similar how Amazon is providing value to their customers. And is there an easy answer to this? Simply that the American Booksellers Association cannot simply blame solely on Amazon on the result, but obviously if Amazon on their part is trying to squeeze out competition so that they'll be the only online bookstores in the market, then that's another issue altogether. But I think the US bookstores have a strong case in terms of you know especially with the pandemic that's going on. Many businesses have to shut down, and it's more likely that more businesses will be affected here, whether in the short run or in the long run. And obviously, the issue here is that the loss of jobs and tax dollars is significant to community centers. Obviously, having a brick and mortar store, you hire people, you generate revenue and help the community. But it is what it is. And bookstores turnover are down by as much as 31%. And how long before they can recover, we'll still have to wait and see. Continuing, so going now into the gaming industry. So I think we've discussed Microsoft as to their situation of how are they dealing with the upcoming launch of their Xbox console, or Xbox Series X or Series S, to compete with Sony's PlayStation 5. Now, they made big news recently by acquiring big publishers, Bethesda for what do you call this? Bethesda for acquiring big titles such as Elder Scrolls series. You also have what's the other game? The Fallout series, yes, and there's Wolfenstein. There's also Doom, I think, is another. And they're making inroads, so that makes a compelling case for gamers to purchase their platform over Sony's PlayStation console. So today they're also making a deal with a retailer shop that sells games and games console here. So let's see here. So they're partnering up with Gamestop. So for those who are not familiar, it's an American retail store similar to Data Blitz here in our country. So let's see here. So they're trying to partner up with them, or have partnered up, wherein they're giving GameStop an incentive to somewhat give them a cut of any downloadable games or digital game sale that they provide, or they are able to provide, meaning in the back end. So whether it's downloadable content, digital game downloads, or microtransactions, or even paid subscription made through each digital game console. So, the point here is to encourage GameStop to sell what they call this Microsoft Xbox Series X or S over PlayStation. Now, the question is, will it be enticing enough for GameStop to prefer to sell Xbox over Sony PlayStation here? Now, how big of a revenue will this generate? Well, according to the article, it's not by much. Even if it's a small percentage, should GameStop, technically, what do you call this? Disregard PlayStation altogether. Now, take note, they only make a cut if they only sell digital games or digital console. Now, take note, digital consoles meaning you don't have to purchase CDs anymore, hard, physical games anymore. And I think that's something GameStop should really consider, whether to push digital games or digital consoles, because in the end, if people or gamers were to shift from physical games to digital games, not take into account, if you have good internet to be able to download or access the internet in general. But once people have totally shifted to, let's say, a digital gaming economy, meaning no more buying of physical games, then what's the point of having a gaming store like GameStop, right? Meaning Xbox to directly create their own store, sell their consoles through other mediums or other retail stores, and do away with the CD games, which I think that's the main agenda of Microsoft here. And I think somewhat Sony is trying to push also. That's why they're offering two different types of consoles: one with the physical uh, games that you can play with the CDs, and the other one with digital games here. Now, obviously, for our market here, it would be highly unlikely uh, whether majority would adopt a digital type of gaming experience because of poor internet connections and whatnot. And people still like to when you buy a game where you want to sell it, you can still it has a resale value, so it makes sense to have a physical copy of the game. Now, obviously, there's convenience in terms of being able to download it, and you can purchase it at a very affordable rate. They offer discounts. Obviously, that's the whole point of the digital pricing here, to entice you to purchase it, which in my case, I have done in many occasions. So it's always a trade-off, but would you completely, uh, what do you call this? Would you completely switch to one type of gaming experience, whether physical or just primarily digital? It's a case-to-case basis, but I think GameStop should be careful in terms of their deal with Microsoft. So obviously, Microsoft view GameStop as an important component of its gaming ecosystem, obviously, because they're the ones who selling their consoles at the end of the day. And they're pleased to elevate their partnership. But if you're GameStop looking at this situation, if the revenue or cut that they're getting is not significant, I don't think it would matter anyway, right? But it's a good deal for Microsoft, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so next here is so we're now going to the hospitality industry. So obviously during the pandemic, many industries are significantly affected, and none more so than the hotel industry. Obviously, some have to shut down, convert their businesses to different facilities to accommodate the pandemic and so forth. And now hotels are trying to find ways to uh, gain their visitors back by means of subscriptions. Let's take a closer look here. So when you say subscription, meaning similar to how Netflix offer their subscription base. Now, is it viable in this concept? Obviously, streaming service is totally different from subscription based on a hospitality industry here. You're offering a service. Now, can they do the same model here? We'll see. Let's take a closer look. Okay. So again, so hospitality operators, let's see here. Where is it? There you go. So hospitality operators are now trying to use or hoping on-demand stays could be the next must-have membership. Obviously, the difficulty of the travel industry, as it's affected with the pandemic, such hotels, big chain hotels in particular, Intercontinental Hotels Group, Marriott, and Accor are among the major names that have launched and considering monthly payment plans. So obviously, they're trying to attract, not just visitors or travelers at that, but attracting restless remote workers ready for change of scene, which is reasonable if you think about it. But is it valuable or worth it if you're a worker that obviously you're mindful of the safety, but apart from the safety, how much are you willing to spend to work in a hotel wherein you can work at home, or either that you work in your regular office? And one of their rates or their subscription base is they're offering a monthly rate that ranges from a little over $1,000, so that's around 50 to 60,000 pesos. So Intercontinental guests can already enjoy varying access to their hotel's facilities, workspaces, rooms, and facilities. So under the new work from hotel packages. Now obviously $1,000 to stay, regardless how many days they would assume that a person would stay, is not practical if you think about it. And is this going, for an individual, or would a company shell this expenses? Very unlikely. Now obviously they can target a more high-end customers, maybe business travelers, that would be a more appropriate business model to target those types of customers. Now, obviously, what do we have here? Yeah. So obviously, other hotels such as Accor, they're targeting monthly fees as mentioned, repurposing rooms into private gyms and even recording studio. I think this is a more practical approach in terms of obviously if people are concerned in terms of staying in or staycations like they call it, and then why not just find people within the area that can take advantage of their resources and facilities to repurpose them into, like I mentioned, converting into gyms and even recording studios as well. And I think they can use it for other studios as well, not just for recording, but whether work related. So there are opportunities here that they can look into. Also, Marriott is also considering their plans. Uh, Obviously, there's after watching how the subscription based like Netflix, Peloton, and Spotify are generating revenues there, so they're trying to replicate if that's even possible. Well, for me, it's rather unlikely if you think about it, because if you're offering a subscription based like Netflix, obviously you have a plethora of films or videos that you can stream, and it's easily accessed by your customers. Now, if you're a hotel industry or if you're a hotel chain, you're offering the plethora of hotels, worldwide. But the problem is people are restricted in their travel, so how can they take advantage of that? And in terms of pricing, that's the whole point of, you only pay when you're supposed to be staying there. So subscription based, unless it's very affordable, would be, not appealing as much if I were in that position. But anyway, so obviously now's the good time to consider different models that would help the hotel stay afloat until such a time people can go back to their normal activities and start traveling again. Now, obviously, one of the main hurdles, as mentioned, is the traveling restrictions. So obviously, it has pushed, way deep into the latter part of the year, or could be even sometime next year before people can comfortably start traveling again. And another way is maybe hotels can target locals for the subscription base, which is again a reasonable model. But again, is it logical for people? If I were in that place, why would I pay for a subscription base if I would just want to stay, let's say, a day or two, even a week at most, then pay for that entire duration rather than, I can come in and out. So it's similar like if I'm renting a house like that or an apartment. Unless there's a compelling reason to stay there, then it's very unlikely if the benefits of user may be seen as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. But either way, it's also stated that it is not clear what value propositions would be for this pandemic when globally travel restrictions and consumer sentiments are variable. So that's not assurance, obviously. So question here is, change in consumer behavior such as social distancing, reduced travel, and increased remote work is a key factor here. So obviously this creates opportunities for many businesses, not just the hotel industry, to establish new habits and create opportunities to generate more revenue, not just in the short term, but also in the long run. Well, at least in their case, they're doing something rather than nothing, right? And anyway, we have another topic, related story on the hotel industry later, which we'll be discussing anyway. Next, we have here, speaking of fashion, so I'm sure you're familiar with the fashion industry in comparisons like Zara and H&M, right? Now, they're reaping the rewards because of the pandemic in terms of generating online sales. Now, one thing you might not know is there's a big competitor in that same realm in the fashion industry that is the biggest fashion seller, in a sense, you could call it, shopping site or fashion player in the world. And the name is Shane. So let's take a look here. Is that right? Is it Shane? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Let's see here. Yeah. So the biggest online fashion player in the market is not Zara, it's not H&M. It's Shein. So they're the biggest shopping site that you've never heard of. Okay? So they're a fast fashion player that's competing with the likes of Zara and H&M. Now, they've become the biggest and largest purely online fashion company in the world. Okay, so they're a Chinese company that is based solely in Nanjing, China, which was founded way back in 2008. Okay, so their strategy here is to aim the Gen Z, Generation Z, as mentioned, through using social media, using influencers such as Instagram and TikTok, using codes to entice influencers to generate positive review and encourage their followers to purchase their products. Obviously, they're attracting the younger shoppers, which is increasingly uh, check. Yeah, got cut off again. Anyway, so for our next story, we're talking of fashion industry here. Now, for some of you, you may be familiar with the names such as Zara and H&M, but one of the biggest fashion retailer online that you may not have heard of is Shein, which is the biggest shopping site in the world right now. So they're a fast fashion player that competes with the likes of Zara and H&M here. So let's take a closer look. So they have become the largest purely online fashion company in the world, as mentioned of the self-branded products according to Euromonitor. Now they're a Nanjing-based company in China, which was founded way back in 2008. So they're primarily focusing on Generation Z, which is a younger demographic, by focusing on social media, as well as influencers such as Instagram and TikTok, by using discounts to promote their products and entice their followers to purchase their products, which is seems to be effective if you think about it. And it's not just that, by offering low cost products that can compete, cheaper by half the price of other competing products from Zara and H&M. And one thing that they're doing that is important in the latest fashion is they're able to upload hundreds of new design to its app every week. So meaning it's changing their trends and they're able to sell it right away. So obviously that's a big boost for their market strategy. Now, obviously, with the pandemic that's happened, has boosted the sales, online sales, as well as retail sales that competes with the likes of Britain's ASOS. You have Germany's Zalando. You also have Zara as well as H&M, to name a few. And they've already generated, a substantial following. They have a 10 million downloads for their app. So that's a lot of customers using their app, whether you're in the App Store or in Google Play Store. And that's significantly larger comparing to if you're H&M, which only boasts about 2.5 million, and then for Zara there's only 2 million. So meaning Shein is doing a remarkable job in terms of capturing the market online. Now, will they able to sustain this in the long run? Now, one thing that can be perceived as a weakness, if you think about it or look at it, is they're a privately owned company. They also sell through Amazon as another platform, but they do not publicly disclose their sales and other financial figures. Obviously, that could be seen as a weakness in terms of how people or investors could invest in their company, as well as how can they even grow further. And one thing to note, it has limited their visibility. Now, they are not only known outside of China, and it has no domestic presence in their market. Obviously, online shoppers go to Alibaba, there's Taobao, as well as Pinduoduo. So obviously, they can't compete. They don't want to compete in their same market. So they rather compete in other regions, whether in the United States, American region, or in the European market as well. Now, obviously, Shein also works with hundreds of factories, which is in close proximity in their HQ in Nanjing. So obviously, that's why they are able to create new products and be able to ship them as fast as possible. And one of the remarkable thing here is that they are able to compress within 3 days, meaning from drawing board to store, which typically takes around 3 weeks for other companies. So how are they able to do that? That could be the key that makes them, be able to shift the trend and changes with the market as well. Now, obviously, the online market has become crowded, but I think Shein is looking to grab their attention through a network of influencers, or they call it brand ambassadors. So obviously, using influencer is a key here, and an example of that here is what's her name? Yeah, we have here Laura Ilianes, I think it's the right name, who is a student at the University of South Carolina upstate. So she promotes outfit on her social media app, wherein the company provide her a discount of 15%, and then she shares her followers, which is around 36,000. So you can just imagine, if you have more followers, you're obviously Shein could reward, Laura with a more lucrative deal, and which in turn can generate more sales and revenue for Shein here. Now, for some updates, now we were talking last time about the state of the entertainment industry, in particular, how movies are being pushed back because of, delays, apprehension of generating low revenue, so that, movie theaters are having a difficult time. They've reopened, some have reopened, some have closed, because they don't have any blockbuster films that they can show to the public. So one such company or movie theater company, Regal Cinema World, has chosen to remain or to close their movie theaters indefinitely, or temporarily, sorry. On the other hand, AMC, which has a partnership with Universal Studios, continues to operate their theaters with their partnership. So they're trying to find ways to entice their moviegoers to watch movies on a movie theater. In the case like AMC, they're offering a private theater rental for as little as $99 or $100, or a little as much as 5,000. Now, will it be enough to entice you as a moviegoer, or in my case, to visit it? Now, obviously, their concept here is to encourage people of the same group, meaning people so you'll be much more comfortable to visit or watch a movie. But question, what type of movies can you watch here? Anyway, so let's see this one. Okay, so what their goal here is, it will allow groups of 20 people to watch a film on a big screen without having to share an auditorium with strangers, which is, I think that's a good strategy here. But the question is, what are you going to offer in terms of movies here? Is it the latest films, or is it really old films, right? So what they plan here is to offer starting prices at $99 plus tax, as mentioned. Now, obviously, cinema goers are wary of attending because of, no good films that you can watch and so forth. And one of the concerns that AMC is now encountering is and they're telling their investors that they could run out of cash by end of the year, which is another reason why they're pushing different strategies to encourage customers or moviegoers to use their facilities here. So what they're planning here is, let's take a look here. So they're offering to reshow older films on request, so it depends on availability. Now you can watch older film as much as $99, as mentioned earlier, In the case of a newer film like Tenet, it costs between $150 to $350. So 350, that's around 20,000. So for each person, 1,000 pesos. Would it be worth it? Maybe, maybe not. It would be cheaper just to watch it at home. But again, obviously they could make it or market it as a big activity for many companies here. But obviously companies are shifting their strategies to work from home rather than congregating in one place altogether. So I don't know how effective would it be. And obviously they're still pushing for continued operation, not like with Regal here as well. So, obviously, as a moviegoer, I love watching movies, but is it enough to convince me to risk going to watch films? Not any good films at that. Now, if there were blockbuster films like, the latest one that was supposed to be released, which was pushed back already, Wonder Woman, then there's also, or was it the last, no, not last James Bond, but the last Bond for Daniel Craig and so forth, right? So if there's no compelling reason, it's very unlikely that people would, flock to movie theaters. Now there would be some who would still flock regardless of the situation, but it's not the majority, and I think that's the main problem from AMC. And should they consider closing shop temporarily? And with what Regal is doing, I think that's the right way to do. Now obviously jobs would be lost, but it would be better to be lost temporarily rather than making it permanently, right? But it is what it is. So companies has to adjust their strategies. Next, so we were just talking earlier about how hotels are looking for ways to generate revenue, and in particular here locally. So obviously with the pandemic, with the, I won't say order, but with the situation for our kababayans who are returning, or kababayan who has to go back to their respective countries, are stuck here in quarantine, and hotels have been shifted. Yeah, shifted is the right word. Shifted to a more enjoyable, but into a quarantine hotel business, just to be able to survive during this pandemic. Now, is this a good business model? Well, it's better than closing shop, right? And I think for many hotels in the country, in particular, they have no choice, right? And obviously, people who use or transition to a quarantine facility, whether for returning immigrants or Filipinos to stay afloat amid the coronavirus pandemic, which has already sickened almost 400,000 people and killed 7 million people in 7,000 people, 7 billion. Sorry, it's 7,000 people in the Philippines. Now, obviously, this is a nightmare for any businesses in the hotel industry, and they have to find ways to stave off, extinction. So they're in survival mode, as so to speak. So one of the strategies, like they mentioned, is Robinsons have shifted their hotel into a quarantine business. So it's a more lucrative industry if you think about it. At least it provides them continuous flow of revenue until such a time when people can go back to their normal lives. And one such hotel that they're using is the Go Hotel, if you're familiar. And another is the 3-star Summit Hotel. They're using it from other hotel properties from Dusitani Hotel in Cebu. Now another one is the Golden Pacific. It's Golden Phoenix Hotel in Pasay City. So they became a quarantine hotel also during the height of the lockdown. Now obviously what they're stating is little profit is better than no profit, which is reasonable. As long as you can stay operational, retain jobs rather than fire people, as long as you can, survive this critical juncture, and you can always recover in the near future, whether it be 6 months or a year from now, because it will pass eventually. The question is, what do you do for the short or meantime period here? And is it a good strategy overall? It's better than no strategy at all, right? And according to the tourism department, they're already allowing Baguio and Boracay to resume tourism activities, which is great news if you're planning to go back home to your native town, or you're planning to, I don't know, maybe visit those towns or cities, But is it safe? That's the main question here. Obviously, there will be protocols here in terms of maybe self quarantine, many requirements and so forth. And obviously, they still have to consider people who are willing, especially the locals or travelers that who wants a staycation period outside of their houses. Now, one of the hotels, Golden Phoenix, has opted to remain a quarantine hotel instead of transitioning back to a staycation hotel. Now, obviously, this would work for the short period rather than the long period. But obviously, if you can integrate both in terms of offering both as a quarantine hotel, also for for your long-term loyal staycationers, so to speak, and that will be valuable because when do people start traveling again, and they would remember which hotels would provide the better service and you know and eventually can take advantage of generating more revenue. And at the end of the day, people will start traveling. It will not be lost forever. People will still travel. It's just a matter of time, like Miss Bocanegra stated. And finally, for our last story, now something you may find interesting. Well, I found it funny anyway. So during a pandemic, people can still find love in a sense. What type of love? Well, here's the ironic thing: a teenager has finally found a dream date of sorts. What do I mean by dream date? Well, let's take a closer look. You'll be surprised who's her dream date that she considers. So it's Godzilla, which is kind of surprising. So a teenager finally achieves her dream of dating Godzilla. I don't know whether to take it seriously or to laugh out loud here, but it is what it is. And according to the article here, the 13-year-old Sierra Watanabe is a huge Godzilla fan, obviously. So she has a collection of figurines and does an excellent impression of Kaiju's roar, as she mentioned. And then there was an opportunity. There was a television show in Osaka, Japan. I think it's called Tentai Night Scoop, where they offer requests from viewers, typically silly ones, so turning those dreams into reality. I guess that came to be, and based on the latest episode, so the TV show visited the teenager, and surprise to her knowledge, she saw Godzilla right outside her house, and she fell down and had difficulty breathing. So that was her date. So you can see here, yes. So they visited her house, and look at her surprise. So happy seeing her dream date. So she went on a date with Godzilla, as mentioned. They packed bento. Packing a bento she made, bring her grandfather as a chaperone. Okay. Then the couple visited different locations. The Godzilla Museum is one on Awaji Island. And then they also hold hands. They have here, let me see. Yeah. There you go. So they were holding hands. And then they check out the display as in earlier in the image. And then later during lunch, Godzilla couldn't actually eat the bento, so she pretended to feed her. How nice. And then she also to pretend give him some tea. Now, is Godzilla a boy or a girl? I don't know. Anyway. And then the date drew a close where Godzilla waited on the beach at sunset, where Sierra gave her a hug. Okay, that was nice. A big smooch and then proposed. So the date was more than that. Well, sadly, Godzilla did not take her hand in marriage, and she ended up having a memorable date. Now, I don't know if that's true love. Well, she's still young. Anyway, I think love can happen in the most unpredictable times, especially during a crisis or during a pandemic. Anyway, that concludes our discussion for today. If you want to check out the full article of any of the topics that was discussed, you can check out the link in the description below. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell icon so you can stay updated with the latest news as well as other videos. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Take care.